Student Ministry Conversations podcast. This podcast is all about equipping, encouraging, and inspiring youth pastors weekly with topics that are brought to the table by youth pastors from all over the world. And now here's your host for this week, Micah Marshall.
Hey, and welcome to the podcast. If this is your first time listening to us, we want to welcome you, invite you to go over to our website, studentministryconversations.org. You can find all of our previous recordings on the Student Ministry Conversations, the show notes, blog articles, hacks, just all this different type of stuff that you can check out and be able to look into. And our goal here at Student Ministry Conversations is that you are inspired, encouraged by the things you hear, that you learn something. And this whole podcast is based around being able to equip you to be a better youth pastor, student pastor, whether you're full-time, bivocational, it doesn't matter. This is just to help you serve the ministry that you're in. And super excited to be with you today. My name is Micah, one of the hosts here, and I am sitting down with my friend, my brother in arms, my dude, Johnny Burkhalter. Johnny, what's up?
Man, listen, dude, I'm just over here living the dream, trying to stay in skinny jeans. If skinny jeans are still cool, I don't know. The verdict is still out. But yeah, man, just loving life, loving Jesus, man. So pumped to be here.
Yeah, so Johnny and I met several years ago. He was at that time traveling, doing worship ministry. And since then, things have shifted and changed in his life over the last several years. But Johnny, tell us a little bit about where you're at. Tell us about, how you transitioned from where you were to where you're at today. And just kind of a little bit, give us a little bit of an introduction of your ministry journey.
Yeah, sure. So my wife and I, we've been in vocational ministry for close to 20 years, which tells a lot about my age, which I won't disclose my age. I won't say that, but you can just do math maybe. So for 20 years, been in the worship space, and I don't know. I guess 2021. I got a call from a friend, and he said, "Hey, man, I know you're a worship guy, but we really need a youth pastor." They were coming off the heels of COVID and all of that, and so they had a history of a thriving youth group. But with 2020, all the things that happened there, they were kind of looking at restarting and rebranding, and so we prayed about it, and I began to think about my own journey. And my story starts as a 15-year-old in a youth group at a conference somewhere, looking at the worship band, thinking they're the coolest thing. And so I began to just kind of connect the dots, and I thought, man, there's so much of my story that's connected to student ministry. And so it just felt like a natural fit for us to, even though we had never done it, like we'd always helped, we've done youth conferences, we've led worship at youth camps, all the things, but never kind of sat in the seat of a student pastor. And so we just said yes against maybe our better judgment, right? We just knew God was doing it. God was speaking to us to do it. And so we moved back from LA County. I'm going to call it LA because no one's going to know the little Southern California town we lived in. But it was LA County. For the record, my wife is watching this and says, "You didn't live in LA. It was LA County."
LA County.
Yeah, street cred.
Yeah, Natalie.
So we moved back from LA to the Atlanta, Georgia area, and we sat exclusively kind of in a student pastor role for close to 2 years before kind of moving back into a worship kind of pastor space. But what was so just, I guess, seamless about that is what we have the opportunity to do now isn't just to oversee worship from an adult standpoint, but we get to oversee worship across all platforms. So any given day, I'm walking into a 4th and 5th grade environment and kind of getting to speak into their worship, or I'm walking into a middle school environment and getting to speak into their worship. High school, the whole thing kind of just trickles under our umbrella, and so it's so beautiful how the Lord kind of writes our story when we let Him. So each and every week, along with shepherding our adult worship ministry every Sunday, we're always in a student space, whether it's in middle school or high school. We just split our groups up because God's just moving and growing. We don't use the word split. We use the word multiply. Words matter, right? So split's like, but I don't know, split. I mean, anyway. But so each and every week to this day, even though the title on my door may say worship pastor, we are in a student space every week, pastor worship in some, and I like to say it like this: we're all in student ministry in some form, whether we know it or not, because chances are there's someone on your team that is a Gen Zer, whether you are, I mean, like you might be like we have a guest services team, and I guarantee you there's a 22-year-old on that team at the front
Mm-hmm.
door, or a 22-year-old in the cafe brewing a latte. Like we're all shepherding and discipling Gen Z right now. Like whether it's hit us yet or not. Like so, it's so important. I'm so grateful that we get to. Not only do we get to sit exclusively in that seat for a while, but now we get to kind of have this overseeing role where we get to still have a hand in it and be connected to it, because whether we know it or not, no matter what seat you sit in ministry, you are influencing the next generation, like you just
Mm.
are.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's so good. That's so good. One of the biggest reasons I asked you to be on this conversation with me and to talk is because, worship ministry has always and will always be a very important part of our culture as Christians. We're going to be singing for all eternity, so we better like
Mm,
it. You know what I'm saying?
yeah, yeah.
But let me ask you this, Johnny, because you've been doing this for like 20 years. We have seen a lot of different styles of worship come and go. We've seen, from these are the days of Elijah for with hymns, and then with like the modern elevation and Planet Shakers, Hillsong, Chris Tomlin, all those guys. Why is it important that we foster a worship community in youth ministry?
Yeah, I think worship, its bare bones is communicating with God, right? It's adoring the Lord, it's worshiping, it's giving praise and thanks to God. It's a line of communication to the Lord. And as much as we need the word is for us, right? The word is for us,
Mm,
but worship is for Him. And so when we remove that, I think we take away an opportunity for students to connect with God. And I think there's something about, John 4:24, for God is a spirit, we must worship in spirit and truth. There's something about uh, the spirit and the truth that when they come together,
mm,
something happens, right? And so let's say
yeah.
let's say the truth is the word, because we know that's a fact, right? And then the spirit being our song, you know what I mean? So like, I you put those two together, and all of a sudden something opens up in the room. So I'll say it like this: we had an opportunity recently where when we multiplied and we did middle school and high school, we thought, well, if we do this, we're going to have two worship teams, two production teams, all the things, we literal multiply. And so we thought, well, do we just eliminate worship? And I
Mm,
said, no. Like, I know that might be easy, but we're crippling ourselves, and we're taking away an opportunity for students to connect with God in such a way. And there's something about worship that softens the heart to receive the word. It just does. When I think about 15-year-old me, I'm sure I heard a million great messages. I'm sure I did, but I don't remember any of them. Like I just don't, you know. But here's what I do
yeah.
remember. I remember being in the presence of the Lord. I don't remember the song they were singing. Like is equal. Like it's not about what we're saying or what we're singing. It's about the
Mm,
moment that worship creates.
come
It's
on,
the
come on.
moment that worship creates, where we connect with God, where life change happens. It just is. It's a connection point with God, a line of communication like none other that we have. And when you take that away, you remove an opportunity for students to connect with God. Again, when I look back, I couldn't tell you what song they were singing, but I can close my eyes and go to that place when I felt the presence of the Lord, and it set my whole life up. It changed the trajectory of my life, just having an opportunity to be in the presence of the Lord. So I think that's what worship creates. Worship opens up that opportunity for students to be in God's presence, and I think that's the biggest piece of it. Even if it's, it doesn't matter how it looks, right? And you
Yeah.
mentioned Days of Elijah. That was my jam, dude. Like I remember, I go that far back. But yeah, so the method changes, but the message stays the same. And I think the heart of it all, no matter how you do it, whether you have a full band, whether you have a youth pastor that knows four chords on an acoustic guitar, it doesn't matter. I think the goal is we have to commit to giving students an opportunity to be in God's presence.
That's so good. That's so good. And I know like anyone watching this that works with students, anyone that's in youth ministry culture, we know sometimes part of what we do is reading the room, right? Like reading the room of where they're at. And so as an expert in being someone who is able to lead worship. Um, what do you do? What are we supposed to do? How can you help us as leaders, and how can you encourage us when we're getting ready to read that room, and that room is not looking real good? That room is not looking ready. That those
Yeah.
attitudes are there. That tiredness is there. Maybe that resentment is there because mom or dad made me come, or to the service I didn't want to, or maybe I had a bad day. How do you help encourage or foster an environment to be like, okay, let's engage into worship? Because I know for me personally, that was a struggle for me early on, is to be able to know what to do with worship when I'm reading the room and be like, okay, like, do I do the slow song? Do I jump into the fast song? Like, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah. Number one, expert is just a kind way of saying I'm old. But I appreciate. I'll receive it today. But yeah, one of my mentors, they said one time, we're not a thermostat, or excuse me, we're not a thermometer. We're a thermostat, meaning
Mm,
we don't check the temperature, we set it. You know what I mean?
yeah,
And so there's
yeah.
something about, and I'm trying to teach our students this right now, and it doesn't happen overnight, but when we commit to it, I think God can start to cultivate it in us. But I think we don't wait for something to happen. We know that God has put in us the ability to lead students into a moment. Like
Okay.
last night, great example. We do a big Wednesday service. The first Wednesday of the month is like our big thing. We all come together, all the middle school and high school, and I normally I'll jump up there and sing with them, but last night I just played the piano and I had all students on the front line. I think the oldest person up there was like 20, 21. But I had this is nerd talk, but I had the talkback microphone, which is like a microphone that nobody can hear except for the singers. And there was a point where like I could tell like they're singing their hearts out, right? And there's like 100+ kids just like looking at them, right? And so you know what I mean? It just happens. It happens. And I said, hey, invite them to lift their hands. Just ask them to do it. And the minute that the worship leader said, hey, y'all, can we lift our hands? They didn't say anything magical. They didn't say, they weren't like, it wasn't, Chandler Moore up there. It was just a random student who said, hey, will you lift your hands? Every single hand without hesitation went up because they were being led. And so I think we have to understand that God has given us the ability and the authority to lead those moments, right? So if you see them, sometimes they're going to happen, and that's beautiful, where you can just walk up and they're worshiping on their own, and the temperature's already set. But there's other moments where I think we have the opportunity to go up there and lead them into it. What does it look like to lead worship? I mean, I
Mm,
tell people all the time, I said, if we don't lead people in worship, we're just singing songs. Like there has to be a moment, and it starts in a student level. Because I honestly I believe you get students on fire. You get students, if they can get a heart of worship, it will spread throughout your church. I've seen it too many
yeah.
times. It just happens. So if you get students to understand this, adults will too. But there's a part of worship because it can be awkward, right? It just can. Like people
Hmm.
like, especially with students, bro. Like middle school. Oh my gosh, like they will humble you. Like they will humble you fast. But it's the leading part of worship where we have an opportunity to invite them, to teach them this is what it means to lift your hands. This is what it means to, why are we closing our eyes? We're eliminating distractions. Why are we lifting our hands? We're letting go of whatever it is we carried in here and we're giving it to God. Like kind of explaining the why to,
Hmm.
to what's happening in worship. And I've seen it, man, over and over again. When you just walk them through, this is why we're worshiping. This is what's happening when we worship. Like God's going to meet you right here. You don't got to be perfect. Like you can just be who you are, where you are. God's going to meet you. Something happens um, when we take advantage of that opportunity that we have to lead the moments, and they can happen every week. They may look different every week. Some weeks might be cry night. Everyone's crying, everyone's in their feels, whatever.
Mm, mm.
Other weeks might just be a moment where we just pause and we reflect and we just are aware of God's presence in the room. But I would encourage every youth pastor, not just youth pastor, but even pastor, you are the head worship leader in your
Mm.
ministry. You just
Yeah, that's
are.
good. That's
You
good.
are. So, like, you show them how to worship by worshiping yourself, number one. But also, whether the worship team is skilled and they're the bomb.com or they're not, you have the opportunity to come up at the end of a worship set and lead students even for a moment into worship, whether you can sing or not. Like, you have the opportunity to come up there and say, hey, before the song ends, let's not make this about a song section. Let's make this about worship. And you have the opportunity to minister in that moment and bring kids into worship. And I think you would be shocked, because I've been shocked at how willing students are to follow in worship specifically. I think that this is this is a whole widespread, like, you could probably
Yeah.
copy and paste this in a lot of different, lanes, but I've just seen it too many times in worship, where if you just give them the opportunity and if you help walk them through what's happening, they're so willing and they're so ready to do it. And then when we just open that door, God does the rest, man.
Yeah.
There's a tenderness to the heart of this generation. Like, all we've got to do is just lead them down the path, and then they take it from there. They really do.
Yeah, no, I love that. I love that aspect of really, it having to do with cultivating the atmosphere that's there. I love what you said about, being, the difference between the thermometer and the thermostat. Being able to gauge that. And I'm a firm believer that we can teach a generation to have the spirit of expectancy.
Mm,
But we need to also teach them how to move forward in that expectancy. And sometimes it is, hey, let's all close our eyes. Oh, let's right. Because you're talking to someone here who has zero musical ability, none whatsoever. When the Bible says make a joyful noise, that's me. That's the noise. It's not like a sweet melody before God. It's like, it is noise. And so I had to learn very quickly, how do I cultivate worship, and being the worship leader, but not being the one that leads the songs.
yeah.
And I think it's so important because, like, you'll have the difference between a middle school boy who's just like spinning in circles and not paying attention, to a high school senior who's getting ready to graduate and has had such a deep encounter with God in the last few years, that like
Mm,
they're right next to each other engaging. And youth ministry is a wild atmosphere because you never know. Like, you can plan for everything, and everything you plan for will not happen. Like, that
right.
is youth ministry in a bubble. Like, we can have a plan, but like the plan can get thrown out very, very quickly. And being able to do that. Now, what about these small churches? Because like there's a lot of great churches out there that are big, that are huge, but like the average church is about 100 people in America, and like the average youth group is like 12 kids. What do you how do you encourage those youth groups that are smaller youth groups that might not have the band, that might not have this, not have that?
Yeah.
What are some options that like you can say, hey, if you're not doing worship, these are some things you can do to step into that?
Yeah. Take your worship leader to coffee and ask him to hang out once a month. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Start somewhere, even if it's, I know when we were sitting in the youth pastor role, like, exclusively, we only did worship once a month. The
Hmm.
first, and that's all we could handle. Like, the rest of the month was small groups and like hangouts, and there might be an acoustic guitar in a living room somewhere, maybe not. But it was that first Wednesday where we knew we couldn't do it every week. We couldn't produce it every week, but we could produce it
Hmm.
once. So look at what you can do, and start there. Even if it's just including it once a month. If you get your worship leader to come out once a month and lead a song or two, like, you know what I mean, like, whatever that looks like,
Well,
you
even
know.
if it's like, what about even if it's like, if you don't have someone capable of doing it, what about like throwing up a YouTube video that
Sure,
has
yeah,
those words? Because I know for us, we did that. We've had moments where it's like, and it feels weird because it feels like spiritual karaoke, because I'm reading the words and I'm singing, but yet there is a level of engagement
sure.
that your kids in your group can move in on.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Yeah, even down to that, you like you just said, uh, create, even if it's one or two songs. It might be weird to have 30 minutes of YouTube worship. I don't know, but start somewhere, and maybe once you get comfortable with one, worship video, maybe you move to two. You know what I mean,
Hmm.
and then, like, just start somewhere. And I would encourage too. If you've got small group leaders on any level, which hopefully you do, even at a small church. Um, there's a relational buy-in with a small group leader that cannot be matched. It just can't. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
if you're a church and you've got small group leaders, encourage them to worship alongside that middle school boy doing a
Mm-hmm.
backflip. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
show them how. Like I just we're very fortunate here. We have an incredible crew, but I told our small group leaders a while back, I said, hey, y'all worship with your group. Like, let us be like, we don't want to be we don't want to correct, we want to direct, like, as a worship
Mm-hmm.
leader. Like, it's weird if I'm like, you know, so I throw up my hands, yo, I'm about to, like, it's weird, I can't correct in that moment.
Yeah.
I can redirect, hey guys, let's focus in. But if you've got a small group leader or a system like that they can worship next to, even do a YouTube video. Like, hey, go stand with your
Mm-hmm.
group. If you're a guy, like, even if you've got 10 kids, 5 of them are guys, 5 of them are girls. You got a girls small group and a guys small group, right?
Mm-hmm.
Have your guys small group leader hanging out with your guys, your girls with your girls, to show them, even in that moment, we're going to worship. I know that's Carrie
Mm-hmm.
Joe up there on a YouTube video, but like, we're going to worship even from that, even on that level, like creating layers of leadership in worship.
Yeah. Well, I think it's important too, because like when we show them that worship can be done in any environment, in
Yeah.
any situation, that like you can find, there's that, like, I find a reason to worship, right? Like I'm able to find my ends. If it's just me singing a cappella by myself, and the heart is in it, then that's what matters, and that's really what we can connect with. And I think so oftentimes, and I know you and I have talked about this in the past. There's so much that we have to compete with sometimes as a youth culture, where we look at like concert venues. Like, listen, I can't compete. I can't compete with like all of the concert type styles anymore. Like, we're so far behind that like I can't compete what it would be like to be at a Taylor Swift concert. I can't like to be like with like Snoop and Dre or whatever, Biggie, or even like King and Country or Carrie Joe. I can't offer you that, but what I can offer you is the opportunity to be in the moment to just worship the King of Kings.
Mm.
I can facilitate that moment, and I think so much we get caught up in like, oh well, we got to have, because I mean, when we were in youth group, Johnny, remember it was all about the lights, the sound, the smoke machines, all of
Yeah.
that type of stuff, and how much has changed over those last years, where here we are now in a culture that is so relational driven. So not, and I want to say this, and not in a weird way, but like the intimacy of relationships, the intimacy of knowing each other and being able to do that,
Yeah.
that's Gen Z and Gen Alpha to like a T now of where we're at. And so how can we encourage people, like, even the setup, the practical setup? What do we need? What does that look like?
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned it. Like, I mean, it really is relationship driven. And I think more than maybe any other generation, uh, the one that we're cultivating now responds to authenticity.
Mm-hmm.
I remember one of the first conversations I had. I called a buddy of mine when we were stepping into the student pastor role, and I said, "Hey, man, like, what? Like, you got one thing that, like, you got 30 seconds. What are you saying to a new guy? And he said, he said just what you're saying. He said, our generation we were consumers. We wanted to go to the concert, go to the conference, and we were oohed and awed. This generation, they're contributors. They want to be a
Mm-hmm.
part of it. They want to do the thing. They want, you know what I mean? Like, so I would even say, like, get them involved in whatever it is that you're doing, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
start to get that buy-in. Maybe even it's, hey, you get to run the YouTube video. Like, I know you're
Yeah.
14, but you know how to work YouTube. You know what I mean? Like, you're gonna be our guy in the back. Like, you know
They
what I
probably
mean?
know how to do it better than we do, right?
I mean, it only takes
But
30 minutes to turn a microphone on today. But
right, yeah.
I mean, so create buy-in there, but you don't have to have the latest and greatest, man. You don't, like,
Mm,
sometimes it's even if you do have the latest and greatest, I would encourage you to find opportunities to strip it all back. You know what I mean?
mhm,
And so I think just creating a space is the most important. And if you've got a screen for a
mhm,
YouTube video, and you can move some chairs so they can come up front and stand up. You know what I mean? Make it feel a little different, maybe than a Sunday morning. Remove those chairs and those limits, right? Just create a unique space for them. But it's all about the space. It's not,
Yeah.
it's not about the lights and all that stuff. Sometimes that can be more distracting. Here's what I'm finding. I'm finding in this generation, like they like the praise. It's cool. Like, but when we get to worship, when it's the less complicated, the more clear, that's when they connect, man. Like
Yeah.
less complicated and just be clear. Like you don't even got to sing, the song that has 7 verses and 18 chords. Like, you know, even if you start off with "Great Are You, Lord," like whatever it is,
Yeah.
like scale back, what makes it so complicated, and focus on how do we just make this clear, and how do we create this, even if it's 5 minutes with a YouTube video, like dedicated space. Here's what we're gonna do. How can we create buy-in? Maybe you have a student who opens up in prayer, and then another student who's firing off the YouTube video. Like now they're bought in. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
that contributor mindset. Like they don't want to just consume and watch. They want to do and be a part.
Yeah, yeah, no, and I think that is so important to that what you said is they want to be a part. Gen, especially Gen Z and in Gen Alpha, we see it coming up is everything is about intentionality. It's all about those intentional connections and intentional moments, and they want the authenticity as you were talking about of that. And there's nothing more authentic than connecting with God in a moment of worship.
Mm,
That is like one of the purest moments of authenticity that we could have. And so like I love that we're having this conversation because I don't feel like this is often talked enough about in our circles of the reality of worship and what it can do. And I mean on a selfish end, and you might be able to speak to this too, but I know for me on a very selfish end, it is a whole lot easier for me to come off the seat and preach after worship than it is to come in like right off of a game or come off of like announcements and speak. There's
right.
like this, there's a connection there, even for me as the speaker, that helps cultivate, like, I don't know, just helps me be able to flow right into it. Like, do you find that as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it kind of goes back to the spirit and truth working together, right? I think there's something I jokingly say, like worship leaders, we're not called to play the role of Michael Jordan. We're the Scottie
Mm.
Pippen in the
Yeah.
equation. That's an old school reference.
And if
So
anyone doesn't know who that is, just go watch The Last Dance on
yeah,
Netflix or
Netflix. Yeah.
ESPN. You know exactly what we're talking about.
Yeah. And so like there's a setup that happens with worship that gets the word kind of prepares the room and the hearts in the room for the word. And so again, yeah, I think that's why it's so vital. It all works together in that process of softening a heart, preparing a heart to receive. The word doesn't need, God doesn't need us at all, right? The word doesn't need any,
Mm.
it doesn't need a pre-show, but there's just a truth behind it, I think, like a principle that's there, that when we can get it right and connect it in such a way, that it does breathe life into what you're saying. And yeah, I mean, yeah, 100%. I want to come up. I want to come up out of the worship, bro. I want him still
Yeah.
playing behind me, dude. I want to be the guy that's like, let's go back into the chorus. Like I want to be that guy.
Sing it one
What?
more
Yeah,
time.
yeah. And the band's like, the click stop. What do we do? No, I'm kidding. That's nerd talk. But yeah, there's something very powerful about it. And again,
Mm.
even on a lower level, like even if it's just that video before the message, something about it, right? There's, I look at the conversation. I'm rambling here, but
No, go ahead.
I look at the conversation between Peter and Jesus, and I quote this conversation a ton. It's just so powerful to me, where there's an exchange that happens where Jesus asks Peter, "Who do you say that I am?" Peter goes down the list. He tells Jesus everything everyone else has said, right? Some
Mm.
say you're a prophet. Some say, you're this, you're that, and Jesus is like, "No, I need you to tell me who you think that I am." And it's upon Peter's confession that you are the Messiah, you're the Son of God. It's upon Peter's confession, Peter's praise, if you will, that Jesus can give Peter his purpose and say, upon
Mm.
this rock, upon this truth, I'll establish my church. So there's a conversation that happens when we first praise God, that then purpose can be revealed. Like there's just something that happens there that worship blends itself so well to. We got to give God the praise first, and then it opens up opportunity for God to pour purpose into the room. It's just I don't know the math behind it. I failed algebra, but there's something so powerful there. There's a recipe for greatness and a recipe for redemption when we put those two together.
Yeah, man. That is such a powerful illustration for us to be able to know that. And so, Johnny, thank you so much for being on this with me and just sharing in this conversation. Do me a favor, let everyone know about, number one, about your podcast. We want to be able to promote that, and then where they can all find you on socials.
Yeah, I thought I'd start a podcast like everyone else. No, I'm kidding. Yeah, it's essentially just a church culture podcast. That we realized that there's a lot of church kids out there having conversations that what it started from conversations I was having with my friends. I was like, hey, people probably need to hear this stuff. Like this would probably help someone. So it's just the Johnny B podcast on all platforms. Social, the Johnny B. I recently accidentally went viral. I'm not going to say how or why. I'm not.
No. Because I would. Why don't you let everybody know how you went viral? And when I mean like he went viral, he went viral.
Like it was. Listen, I'm going to circle all the way back. You just got to be authentic, right? Because I wasn't trying. I was just being me. I'm a dad. I was telling dad jokes before I was a dad, so that really isn't an excuse. But I live in Atlanta, and so we don't get real cold weather a lot. I know in PA, in Pennsylvania, like it's nothing but a thing, right? You're ready. You got your snow tires are ready. But in Georgia, if it gets below like 30 degrees, we do not know how to act. And apparently that day I did not know how to act. And so I woke up, I checked my phone, and it's 12 degrees outside in Atlanta, 12, which is probably a sunny day for you in Pennsylvania. But and so I thought in my head, 12 degrees, one for every disciple. And I chuckled and I poured my coffee and I forgot all about it. And then that morning, our 9 o'clock service, there was we always do like a welcome, like a call to worship, a welcome kind of moment. And I don't know, I mean, if you're a communicator in any way, you can probably relate to that moment where you go blank and you don't know what to say. You've rehearsed it and you went through the run through, the whole thing, but you just blank. And so when I went blank, I defaulted to that bad dad joke. I told myself, 12 degrees, y'all, one for every disciple. And I thought, it's on the live stream. I'm going to get ahead of myself. I'm just going to post it. My mom will watch it. I'll get like 6 likes and we'll move on. 3.1 million views later. And counting, dude. I don't even want to open my phone anymore. It's just crazy, but again, just be authentic, be you. The trolls will come for you. That's all right. We pray for them too.
That's it. Well, thank you so much. And hey, if you're tuning in, I want to encourage you, studentministryconversations.org. Check it out. A lot of great podcasts on there, and we have some great hosts talking to some great guests just about student ministry. I want to encourage you, check out all of our socials, Student Ministry Conversations. We're out there. I hope you got something out of this today. Johnny, again, thank you so much for being with us. And until next time, we'll see you later.